Welcome to season 2 of Chats from the Chest Freezer. Oh, it's 3.9 degrees in here, so let's not stuff around and let's dive into the new season. Well, before we dive into this great chat that I have with Will Hayward, I'd just like to point out a couple of things. I filmed this back in January 2020. The world was very much a different place. But what I particularly love about this chat is just Will's sheer grit and determination. He finished second in the 2019 version of Boars Backyard. And I tell you what, it was absolutely fascinating chatting to him and listening to some of the things that were going on in his mind. Particularly, wait till you hear about his hallucinations. So anyway, before I let the cat out of the bag, here you go. Here's Will Hayward. So, Will Hayward, it's absolutely fantastic to have you here. Welcome to Chats from the Chest Freezer.
Hey, thanks, Sam.
Hey, firstly, absolutely amazing effort at Boars Backyard. 59 hours, finishing second. But before we talk about that monumental, the monumental effort of what Biggs was, I saw all your photos from the Hong Kong 4 Trails only about a week ago.
Yeah.
You ran that on a busted ankle, which, to be honest, did not look very good. But what looked even more painful was that massive lean from a really sore back.
Yeah. So I've done it before. I've done it a couple of years ago. And so, yeah, I was keen to do it again. Sprained my ankle 4 weeks ahead of time, having too much fun in New Zealand. And so, the photo of the day after was not very good. 4 weeks later, it was actually okay, but the mobility wasn't great, so I couldn't really bend it as far as normal. So it started off, was fine, got through about 100 miles. But then started to list to port, and pretty sure what it was because of the lack of mobility in the ankle, my gait changed, and so then my core was having to do a lot more work to try and correct, upright, keep my torso upright. After about 30 hours, it just kind of burned out, and so then I just kind of noticed I was kind of leaning this direction. And first of all, it was just kind of cosmetic. I thought, that's not going to look very good in the finisher photos. But sure enough, pretty quickly afterwards started to, just cause a lot of discomfort. And eventually my kind of back locked up, became really painful going up or down. And so I had to kind of pull the plug after about 100 miles. It
looks like a pretty amazing event, the Hong Kong 4 Trails. The scenery, but also the amount of elevation that you've got to go through.
Yeah, it's 300 k's, a shade less, and about 14,500 meters of elevation change. And I mean, basically anything that's flat in Hong Kong gets built upon, but the mountains are pretty green and there's lots of trails through them. But it means that anywhere there's a trail, it's either going up or it's going down. It's not typically going very flat. So great event. Stephen Redfern, who's an Aussie, well known in the 24-hour team, came out and just smashed it. Did really well. I think came second overall.
Wow.
Yeah.
And whilst you're out on each of the trails, from what I understand, it's unsupported. But does that mean you get to stop in some Noodle Shops along the way? Yeah.
So it's called the 4 Trails Challenge because it's 4 different trails, and they range between 50 k's and 100 k's. While you're on the trail, you're not allowed any support from anybody. So it's all self-supported, but you can buy stuff. On some of the trails, there are some vending machines you can use. And on some of them, there are some shops. But the other wrinkle is it's a Chinese New Year, which is kind of like Christmas. So a lot of the shops that are there are closed anyway. But generally there'll be something open that every, 5 or 6 hours, you might be able to find somewhere you can get some water or some Coke or some noodles. So you really are. It's quite challenging mentally as well because you're having to pack your bag for the next 15, 16 hours. But once you get to the end of one trail, your crew can pick you up. They drive you to the next one. And in that interlude, you're allowed any support that you want. So they can bring lots of food, bring clean clothes, bring everything. But then once they set you on the next trail, then they can't, have any support for you until you finish that one.
Oh, fantastic. So, and I understand the goal is to make it in under 60 hours as a finisher.
Yeah, so there's if you want to officially be a finisher, you do it under 60. You can keep going. If you do it under 72, you're called a survivor. So 2 years ago, I survived it. I was hoping maybe kind of sneak in for a finish. That didn't quite happen this year, so just might have to go back, try it again.
Yeah, so now 300 kilometers, you're really no stranger to it. You've done some pretty big running in your time.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. If I count that, I'm not quite sure. It was a DNF, but I did 100 miles, so I'm not sure if I can count it as a 100-miler. So if I do that, I've done about 800 milers, and I guess about 3 or 4 of them have gone a little bit longer. I mean, then that's part of the beauty of the backyard, right? Is you just kind of keep going. You're not quite sure how long you go for, and sometimes if you're a bit silly, you can find yourself running for quite a long way.
Yeah, definitely. Now, obviously, the last one standing format has just exploded right around the world, and Hong Kong has its version, which is Big Boars Backyard Ultra. When you saw this event come out in Hong Kong, what were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, so I'd followed Laz's, Big Dog's Backyard for a couple of years and thought, it's Laz. He gets some pretty good athletes there, but also just seemed like a pretty interesting format. So I was quite keen to try it, just to do something completely different. And then, it was one of my mates was kind of the race director for the one here. So pretty much as soon as he said he was going to do it, I was like, oh yeah, that sounds good. I'll give that one a go. And one of the nice things about it is obviously that you can really decide how far you want to go. Like you can be in it to win it and say, right, I've booked leave for the next 4 days because if that's how long it goes, that's how far I'm going. But at the same time, if you've never done like a 50K, it's a really great format just to give that a go. And if you do about 8 or 9 laps, then you've run that far, and it's very sociable because you're running with people, and you're coming back to the same place every time. So it's just it's a really a flexible format, and different people are going to run it for completely different reasons, and I think that's a really amazing thing about it.
Yeah. So Big Boys, you obviously went into that feeling pretty confident of getting past 24 hours, but for yourself to finish at 25 hours, obviously everybody's happy with the win, but is there an element of disappointment, and I think sort of only the winners can ever tell you, element of disappointment that you weren't pushed further?
I mean, I would say quite honestly, no. So, hindsight's a beautiful thing. When I went into Big Boars, actually, I had no idea how far I was going to go, but I did have another 100-miler lined up a month later, and that was like a really mountainy one in the Philippines. And so I didn't want to screw that one up, so I was kind of a little bit, I wouldn't say holding myself back is probably too strong a word, but I didn't want to go too deep in the Big Boars one and then destroy myself and then not be able to go to the Philippines and run that one, because that's like a really iconic race too. Yeah. So I'd kind of decided if I could get to 100 miles, that'd be pretty good, go through 24 hours. And there were some other runners in the Hong Kong one that, really like top runners here, super guys, quite a lot younger than me. And so I figured that they would likely go, for another 12, 24 hours. And I was going to be quite happy, maybe just kind of sit there, hang out, drink a few beers, watch them go through the pain. But then what didn't go to plan was they all dropped out that first night, and it was left with another guy and me. We did about the last 5 or 6 loops together. And so it was really just a matter of which one of us wanted to go further. And to be honest, we both thought actually the other one looked a bit better and maybe they should go on and win it. So I was trying to talk Alfair into, continuing. But he wasn't having any of it. He said, no, I'm dropping at 24. And of course, in the format of the race, if both the last 2 runners drop at the same point, then nobody wins, everyone DNFs. And I thought, well, that's not, very good for the race. So in the end, Alfair dropped to 24. So then I knew, okay, well, if I do one more, I'm going to win it. So so kept going. But I was pretty, it had been really humid. I'd thrown up a couple of times during the night. I wasn't feeling great. So I was pretty happy when got to 25. I was the last one. I could just go around pretty easily and then finish. That actually felt pretty good.
Excellent. So you then pick up the golden ticket into Lazarus Lake's Big's Backyard. When they hand you that coin, what goes through your mind?
Well, the first thing that went through was because at that moment I felt pretty terrible. I had no interest in doing another one of these stupid events. But yeah, obviously, you sleep on it for a couple of days, and then you start looking at flights to Tennessee. And I think, Laz, for good reason, is kind of a mythic figure. And if you get the chance to run one of his races, it kind of felt like, can't really turn that down. And obviously super pleased that I did. So it took a couple of days, but yeah, once I put my mind to it, I was pretty excited.
Yeah, so Big Boars, I think, was in April, Big's Backyard in October. So you've got a good, about sort of 7 months or so to prepare. Did you prepare specifically for Big's, or you mentioned the miler that you had in May? Did you have any other sort of races in between?
So I did the one in May and then took about 6 weeks off. And then around the start of July, got into it. And from July, I was training pretty specifically for Big's. I did a couple of other smaller events here, but they were really just kind of training events. Only thing is, it gets similar to Brisbane, gets really humid here in the summertime, and so training through the summer is actually pretty challenging. And it actually was just starting to cool off when it was time to get on the plane and go to Tennessee. So that was a big challenge, just to get the kind of the quantity of training necessary, for something like that. But yeah, in the end, I was able to train pretty consistently, so that was quite good.
So what was your training leading up to Big's?
The thing, so I generally, I'm just like a, decent mountain ultra runner. I'm definitely walking up all the uphills, trying to run down, run the flats. And so my training just generally would be quite a lot of hiking as well as running, and there's good hills around here, obviously, so it's quite a good place for that. So thinking about Big's, it was clear, okay, I'm going to have to do more running than I would normally do. There's not a lot of big climbs that you can hike up. And so midweek, I was definitely doing more running, finding flatter areas, trying to lengthen out a little bit on those runs, making sure I was doing some kind of quality workouts. I worked with a coach, Scotty Hawker, and so he put together a good plan. And so also like working on kind of speed as well, doing intervals. There's a really good 5K series here in August, September, so I kind of entered those to make sure I was going to be able to run at a decent clip as well. But then on my long runs on the weekend, even though it's super hot and super humid and you walk outside in 5 minutes and you're pretty exhausted, I actually did just get out into the hills for that. And that was definitely a mixture of hiking and running, but felt like, that was just kind of good for my headspace. Like that's what I enjoy doing. So I didn't really want to put myself in a training plan that was only for this race and I wasn't actually going to enjoy, because I felt motivation will go to zero. And then the other good thing was that although it was too hot to really be perfect training, it was pretty easy to go out for an hour, be totally exhausted, sweating like a pig, and then try and keep going for another 3 or 4 hours. So get into a state of, not exhaustion, but like being really tired, and then trying to keep going. Felt like that was really good mental training, because that's what the backyard's all about. You just get tired, you want to pack it in, and then you just have to keep going. So putting yourself through that in training, I think, is really helpful.
I was talking to Lazarus Lake a few days ago, and he mentioned to me that a lot of the top ultra guys wished that they had put more walking into their preparation, because they didn't actually sort of recognize the importance of walking and how that changes the body, and sort of, if you haven't prepared with a lot of walking, it can really affect you. You do quite a bit of hiking in Hong Kong as part of your training. Was that something that you intentionally added in?
I mean, like I said, I don't think I intentionally added it in. I was doing it anyway to a degree, but less than I'd normally be doing. I think one thing that was quite noticeable at the event was that, I was quite comfortable walking, just thinking that was a natural part of a big event. And so I was trying consciously not to run too fast, take some walking breaks, get to the end just with a few minutes to spare, enough time to kind of have, get some food, but not a lot of time. So not to sit there for 15 minutes doing nothing. And quite a lot of the other, especially the top athletes, were going quite a lot faster, having a much longer break. But then eventually, even though that was super easy for them, maybe the first 24 or even 36 hours, eventually that toll just got to them. Whereas I'd actually, in some of the loops I was doing at Biggs, if I felt like I was going too fast, I'd slow down and start walking earlier so that I'd get to like a turnaround point at the right time. Just trying to make sure that I was really being careful with exertion that I was putting out.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about sort of the speed, particularly Katie Wright. Certainly not the fastest runner out on the course. Certainly one of the slower runners, and you weren't actually that much faster than Katie across the entire event. And it certainly seems like a strategy of, particularly at Biggs on the daytime courses, only needing 6, 7, 8 minutes rest on the lap. So during that time, that rest period of only, say, 6 minutes, what was your routine?
Come in, sit down. So I had some friends who were crewing me, which was helpful. It's not essential, but it's definitely helpful. They would have like a drink ready. They'd have something to kind of munch on. And so the main thing I was trying to do was get calories in during that time. And again, that's either, like, you're running pretty slowly. I mean, again, depends a little bit on your ability. But most of the runners at Biggs, for example, were running quite a lot slower than they could have run, which meant that definitely the first day, it all feels pretty easy and you can eat what you want. But again, eventually it starts to take a toll, and it was a bit more challenging to get calories in, on like the second day and second night. And then trying to take a bit of a rest, although I wasn't very successful at that. Katie was much better at that than me. She's like a doctor, so I'm sure they get like special ninja training in how to take like a 5-minute nap.
They do.
Felt that was a bit of an unfair advantage. So I didn't really sleep through the whole thing. I think that's definitely something I would change for this year. And then also, just really important to, like, if you've got some mates there, to just kind of, keep your spirits high. Again, it's all pretty fun like at the start, and then at some point it just starts to get hard. And it's really good to have some people there that can kind of talk you around. So that was actually a big part of it too, especially on the second day. I was telling them I was going to quit like around 30 hours.
36 hours or so, yeah.
Yeah. So like, because we at Biggs, there's these two different loops. There's the day loop, which is on Lazarus Farm. It's beautiful. It's on the trails. That's what I like. And then the night loop is on the roads outside his farm. It's just like an out and back. It's really hard. It's pretty boring. And I'd done that for one night already. And going into the second night, I was like, I just can't face that. I'm really sore. I've done what I thought I could do. I can go home, head held high. So I told them, look, I'm going to stop. And they were the ones who talked me out of it. They're like, no, mate, keep going. Just one more loop,
That's a beautiful thing of Last One Standing. Is one more, just one more.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why it's really dangerous. I had tried hard not to have a limit in my mind, like this is what I want to achieve, and to be like, I just want to do one more. And even trying to do that, I discovered when I was there, actually I kind of had this expectation I could do about 36 hours. That was like my stretch goal. And once I got close to that, all the motivation I had to keep going just seemed to kind of ebb away. So the motivation is really interesting, because you can tell yourself before you start, I really want to push the boundaries, I want to see how far I can go. But as you start to hurt, it just begins to get really hard to maintain that intensity. And having some mates who can, remind you of that, or, if you're kind of chatting with some of the other competitors, like, that can be really important to get out of your own head.
Yeah, 2018, when Johan Steen did it without a crew, if you didn't have a crew there, would you have stopped, do you think, at 36 hours, or have you just got this stubbornness that you'd have those conversations in your head, but you'd still get out on the lap?
I'm pretty sure I would have stopped. Yeah. Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I talked to my crew beforehand and said, basically, don't let me stop. So they adhered to that principle. So I don't know. If I hadn't had that, maybe I would have been, a little bit more, stuck it out. But definitely in my mind that afternoon, I was going to stop. I was telling people I was going to stop. I was a bit surprised to find myself still going, to be honest. The great thing about the event, though, even though Johan didn't have a crew, as runners stop, they start crewing each other. So he actually he ended up having some of the other runners, help him out. So that's also a beautiful thing about it.
Yeah, certainly going into Bigs, Will, there really wasn't any expectation for you to be in the last two. But there you were. Katie dropped out, Dave Proctor, who was, sort of expected to be a hot favourite.
Yeah.
And then it's just you and Maggie Guterl hammering it out for about the last 7 hours. How did that feel, just being at that moment, you see Katie and Dave drop off, and then it's just two?
Yeah. I mean, I felt really sorry for Katie when she dropped. We started one loop, and she was complaining about her leg, and she kind of dropped way behind. And then as we came to the end of it, she was kind of there, like telling us she dropped, and that was really sad because she and I, had run quite a lot together. And then a couple of loops later, when Dave dropped, that was totally surprising because he just looked fantastic the whole way. And all of a sudden, he was really struggling. Whereas I've been struggling, but I've been struggling for quite a long time. And so when he dropped, I was really surprised and actually a little bit anxious because since it was two of us, it felt like there was a bit more pressure on me. While Dave was there, I felt like I can drop any time, it's fine. And Dave and Maggie will keep going. Once Dave drops, I'm like, holy shit, if I drop, this whole thing's over. But then that actually became kind of motivating too. It did become a factor in thinking, well, I should try and keep going because now the competition in some level rests on me. I figured Maggie looked great. I figured, well, she'll keep going. So it's really kind of my choice when I stop. When I stop, this thing's over. And then I was having some problems too. I was having some kind of problems with diarrhea, which wasn't, great. And you don't have a lot of time for those toilet stops, right? And especially on that last day, I was taking maybe 56, maybe 57 minutes to finish, a loop. So then you kind of, got to get in and out pretty quickly and to get back on the line for the next one. So I was actually thinking I would have to just stop, just go for that. And then my crew and some of the other guys who came over, just kind of did some magic, found some Imodium that helped. They got me taking some calories because I'd kind of stopped taking calories because of that. So they got some calories in me. And so the morning of the third day, I looked absolutely terrible and felt terrible. And then I kind of started to perk up in the afternoon. So actually that last afternoon, I really remember it was, just Maggie and I on the trails. We were running different paces. So basically the whole time I was just kind of by myself and, and Lazarus, farm, it's kind of like a nature reserve. It's beautiful. It was really kind of pleasant in this kind of weird headspace because you're absolutely exhausted. And then every hour you come in and everyone's cheering you on and this kind of thing. It was pretty fun.
So the hallucinations.
Yeah. I mean, anyone who's done ultras overnight, or through 2 nights will start probably hallucinating. So I'd had those before. The thing that was different was, in the end, I basically my brain was completely fried. So I essentially fell asleep as I was running / walking. So I basically slept-walked for about maybe 20 minutes, half an hour on that last loop. And that's what, so suddenly kind of obviously slowed down, missed the cutoff.
Yeah.
But then was just kind of wandering around on the trail, just to sleep. So it was kind of aware there was a trail, thought I was back here in Hong Kong, kind of exploring some of the villages, just kind of wandering around. Started to feel a bit, because it was raining by this time and sun had gone down, it was starting to get a bit chilly. I had a jacket on, but pretty thin jacket. So started to get a bit chilly. Luckily, it was on the farm, so once I didn't show up, a couple of them came out to find me and found me within about 10 minutes. Luckily I hadn't slipped over, bonked my head or anything. But yeah, so that was a bit unusual. But on the other hand, I feel like you do these things to see how far you can go. Like I definitely tested my limits. Like if you can if you fall asleep while you're going around, you can't really complain too much about that.
No, exactly, and certainly people weren't expecting you to get to 59 hours, but you've obviously shown that you're world class at this. Expectations for Bigs this year?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going back, and a lot of the people you've been talking to are also going back, along with a lot of other people. So like Johan's planning to go back, Courtney Dowell's planning to go back, Camille Heron's planning to go. Most of the US men's and women's 24-hour teams are going. So there's going to be just an incredible array of athletes there. I feel like, I definitely have higher expectations for myself than I did. I was completely surprised to go that far. I mean, a cool thing was I really looked up to Guillaume Calmette, who's like, probably one of the world's best at this format. And his record was 59 hours, and he had come in because he's a super nice guy. He'd come in to help crew me towards the end, and so he told me like the loop before, "Oh, you're about to hit my record," and I was like, "Wow, that's pretty cool," So that was definitely pretty surprising. I've got no idea if I go back if I can even get close to that again. Kind of lightning, in a bottle. It's probably not going to strike twice. Yeah. But at the same time, yeah. Whereas, for example, I didn't really bother sleeping because I figured that my body would give out before I got tired. My mind got tired or anything. But in fact, that didn't happen. So yeah, I'll definitely try and be a bit more systematic. Try and set myself up so that I can go further than I did this time. I think definitely the winner next year will go further than Maggie and I went this year. So even getting the same distance, I think, won't get me, second, let alone winning. I guess the other thing is that, when I went this time, I didn't have any expectations about being competitive at all, because that's not, when I do an ultra, if I get in the top quarter of the field, I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. So I didn't go there planning to get in the top 10, top 5, top 2. I guess when I go back, I do feel like, I should set myself up so that, there's no reason that I can't go longer than anybody else. Time to get some revenge on Maggie. So my own expectations have definitely been raised. But at the same time, I had a lot of success this time because I was really focused on my own process, and seeing how far I could go, not being too worried about those around me. And so other people pulled out when they looked at someone like Dave or Maggie and went, oh, they seem like they're running really well. I'm not feeling that great. I might as well pull out here. I didn't consider that at all. I always thought that Dave and Maggie were running much better than me, but they didn't stop me just pushing as far as I could. So I do want to keep that kind of, in mind. Again, not worry too much about what everyone else is doing. Just try and keep pushing as far as I can go. And yeah, look, if I can go as far again, I'm sure, there won't be a lot of people still running around. So just see how far I can push out.
Yeah, Maggie was looking so strong all the way through, even at 60 hours. Can you tell how much more someone has, or can it just happen in an instant, just, they blow up?
I mean, look, I would say, Maggie's a bit disappointed because if she'd been able to keep me awake, probably she and I could have run further into that third night, maybe even through the third night, and she was really keen to do that. So although, of course, she was happy to win, in retrospect, I think she thinks maybe she should have helped me out a little bit more so that she could, I could then push her a little bit further. I got no doubt she would have run, for another 12 hours. But having said that, 2 laps before Dave dropped, I would have said he was going to go, through the next day and next night as well. He looked great. And then all of a sudden the wheels just came off for him. I think that's kind of how it goes. So, I fully expect Maggie could have gone further, but you just never know. She doesn't know. None of us know. So looking around your competitors, it is hard because people that look fantastic, all of a sudden they just don't line up at the next corral. And so you do need to be a bit careful. You know, if you're basing how far you're going on what someone else is doing, you may end up guessing wrong.
You got, obviously some of the fast runners, and even Maggie and Dave were pulling out some decent times on some of the laps. Did you ever get carried away by other people's speed?
No. I tried to run my own pace. Again, a good thing about the backyard format is however fast you're running, you kind of find your tribe. You find people running your speed, whether it's because that's the speed they're comfortable going, or whether that's because that's what they're choosing to go. So there were definitely some faster runners who were choosing to run more slowly with kind of Katie and me. But there were some faster ones who were going a bit faster to get a longer break. I don't know. I think it's a very personal thing. But I think the most important thing doesn't really matter how fast you run. You just need to be running at a pace that you can hold for as long as possible. And although on the first day I was running probably in the back half of the field, but maybe about 2/3, 1/3, somewhere around there. But that pace I was running on the first day, I wasn't too much off on the third day. I was maybe like a minute or two slower. Whereas there were people who were running much faster than me to start with, but then you'd suddenly notice there's that guy suddenly running my pace. That means they're really slowing down. And once you slow down, there's only one direction it's going. People don't slow down and then suddenly, get a lift and start running much faster again. So you just need to be running a pace that you can really hold, for a couple of days. And it's pretty challenging to get that right.
Yeah. Now, last one standing format is still in its infancy, and I don't think anybody's really sort of nailed out what the right strategy is. Are you going to have a different strategy for bigs compared to the one last year?
So for bigs, I changed my strategy from big boars. The one here, I'd run faster to get a longer break, and I figured that wasn't going to work. So that part of the strategy for bigs, I think, worked really well. So I do plan to pretty much run kind of the same pace that I did for bigs. I think the strategy is more around being a bit more specific and systematic in what I do in the breaks. So have a bit more, I didn't really plan the nutrition very well. I basically went into a supermarket in Tennessee the day before the race and just bought everything I could find. And then.
So what were you having nutrition-wise?
I mean, I was eating a lot of kind of energy bars, and I had a few gels, but not too many. I had some avocado wraps, but only had maybe a couple of those. Had some soup, some kind of soup noodle that was good on occasion. Some fruit. Fruit kind of works well the first day, but then after that, didn't get good out very easily. And then drinking, Gatorade, Coke, ginger beer. Getting in some calories there too. But not very systematic about it. And so I think that could be a lot better. And then also, so for someone like Maggie, for example, overnights was coming in at about 48 minutes, immediately lying down, getting about 7 minutes, maybe sleep, maybe she's just closing her eyes, but at least kind of her mind's at rest, and then kind of getting up, having 5 minutes to eat. Whereas I was kind of coming in, eating something, chatting to my crew, maybe sitting back in my chair, closing my eyes for a minute or two, but not really doing anything. So again, I think you can be much more clear in what you're doing in those breaks. I think the first night that's probably not so important, but it becomes important after that.
On the day loops, obviously the day loops were quite a lot harder, and the amount of rest that you're getting during the day was so much shorter. When you're coming in at 57 minutes, Lazarus blowing that 3-minute whistle. What goes through your mind when you realise that you've only got 3 minutes to start that next one? Yeah,
I wasn't. People comment on how the whistle blows and you're like, oh crap, I've got to do this again. I was actually pretty good about not getting that mindset. I kind of went in with it trying to think, okay, I'm here to run. I want to run. When the whistle goes, that's great because it means I get to run again. That's what I enjoy doing. And I was pretty much able to keep that. So I was always pretty happy when the whistle went and went off again, even if I had a fairly short break. Obviously, when I was feeling really bad, that wasn't ideal. But even then, I don't remember that as being much of a problem. The other thing that was happening on that, when on the last day when I was getting the really short breaks, I'd come and telling my crew I wanted to drop, and I was kind of talking to them, saying, "Oh, that's it," and then they'd say, "No, no, have this," and then they'd put me back on the line, and I wasn't really thinking too much about my own agency. I was just kind of doing what they were telling me to do. So they put me back on the line, and then Laz is blowing his whistle. It's like, okay, time to go again. Like, you know. Yeah. So I didn't have. I wasn't thinking too much. I wasn't weighing up. Oh, shall I stay? Shall I go? Like, yeah, I just kind of went with it.
I actually asked this question of Laz a few days ago, if he reckons someone could go to 100 hours. Obviously, you need pretty much 2 people to go to 100 hours. What do you reckon? Is that possible?
It's definitely possible. Yeah. I think it'll definitely happen, but when it will happen is very hard to know. I think it's quite. It happened last year. You'll hear it again this year. It's really easy to talk up. Oh, we're all going 3 nights. We're all going 4 nights. We're going to do 400 miles, which I guess would be 96. So it's easy to talk up wanting to do that. Yeah. Then you get there, and then you discover, oh yeah, this thing's really hard. Like that's that's why there's not many people going 200 miles. Like we had, normally it's a good effort to do 100 miles in 24 hours. And but at Biggs, it's self-selected, so there's a lot of really good athletes there, a lot of experienced people. So we had about 44 or so people go through miles. I then assumed, so that then gets you to dawn on the second day. I assumed all those people would stay through that second day, and then maybe as we go into the second night, people start getting tired and then really struggle. But in fact, from 44 at the start of the second day, by the time we got to the end of the second day that evening, there was only about 12 of us left. So most of those people actually dropped during the day when it was quite a nice day. But yeah, it's just like running another loop and another loop and another loop. It just gets really hard. So it's harder than you would think to keep going for that long. And yeah, as you say, so one person could be just be knocking it out of the park and be ready to keep going for 100 hours. But you need to have a second person also happen that same day to push it that far. So yeah. So I don't know. I would expect that, if not this year, in the next, year or two, Biggs will definitely go through 3 nights. Like it's never gone that far. So Johan and Courtney made it to like about 3 a.m.
8 hours, yeah.
Yeah, on that third night. Definitely people will push it right through that night, get to the 4th day. But then when the night trail at Biggs is much easier. So when you hit that trail again on the 4th day, it's going to be a really hard loop. So, yeah. So I think that's the first. So get to 72 hours. And I think that's the next kind of threshold to get to.
Wow, it's crazy. Now we've got the Clint Eastwood Last One Standing coming up in Brisbane in August. What's your number one tip for someone who hasn't run a backyard ultra before?
I think the 2 tips would be just do it to enjoy it. Just kind of go to have fun, and then just don't put any limits on yourself. Just come to do one more. Don't worry if that like maybe you've only done like a 20K half marathon before. Maybe you've done a 50K, maybe you've done a 100K. Like, don't worry about that. Like, don't feel like, some runners are going to go maybe, 100 miles or 150 miles or 200 miles. Like, don't worry about that. Just do what you want to do. That's exactly what this is there for. But then don't put any limits on yourself and just see, can I do one more? And yeah, just kind of see where you get to. And definitely it's a format that it's possible to run a lot further than you think you can. But you just want to break it down. It's a race to be very mindful in. Like, you really have to just be in the moment. if you start thinking about, oh, there's another like 6 loops like this, before sundown, it just drives you crazy. So you just got to be, oh yeah, I'm here now. There's that tree around the corner. I'm going to go past that, that rock. Just be in that mindset and just kind of let it unfold and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. We've got Lazarus Lake coming out for this in August. Obviously the guy's going to get mobbed because, as you know, he's got a bit of a cult status around the world for what he's done and what he puts together, and particularly this mad format. But what kind of jobs? Because he's not coming out here just to have a holiday. We've got to get him working. What jobs do you reckon we should get Laz to do whilst he's here at the Clint Eastwood?
I think he's a specialist at keeping the event going, both through, he is simultaneously rooting hard for every runner. Like, he really wants every runner to do well, but he expects to be disappointed by most, right? So he's not going to give you like a participation medal. He's not going to say, oh, that's great, for doing like a loop. He will be, he wants to see people really put it out there. And if they do, it doesn't really matter how far they go, but if he knows that you're giving it, above and beyond 100%, then you'll get his attention, and he'll give you like genuine, praise and support. So I think he's a pretty iconic figure, and one that I think people will kind of respond to and then find themselves, going above and beyond for.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely fantastic. 200 runners, 220 runners. I think it's going to be one of the largest last one standings around the world. It's going to be huge, but it's almost a dead flat course. The biggest hill is about 1 meter in elevation.
Yeah.
And the surface is the same as the clay tennis court, but
right.
The entire way going through bird watching fields. So it's a beautiful course to go for a stroll on, but doing that for 24 hours or 30 hours or however long anybody's going to go for, I bet it gets a bit tiring.
Yeah. And it's the race is as hard on the race director as it is on the runners.
Yes. Oh, I'm glad I'm not race director. Will, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Chats from the Chest Freezer. I've really enjoyed following you and sort of seeing all your exploits, and also running your blog, Will's Random Stories of Running. And good luck with Big's Backyard this year. It's going to be absolutely epic having all the big guns, including yourself this time. So thank you.
Hey, no, thanks, Sam. It's been great.
Yeah.